Thank you very much for welcoming us to this excellent conference here, and congratulations also to the organizational staff, which I think have done a tremendous great job today. I would also like to thank very warmly Dr. Ellertson, for he gave me the idea and he gave me the invitation to come over here, and I'm very honored to be able to speak to you tonight here in this conference. And it's a real pleasure to really talk to you, a very knowledgeable audience, and one on which shoulders, and that's what I learned in the afternoon with all the ministers and deputy ministers, on which shoulders education and training rests in the future for a better future for the younger generation. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm presently working in the United States in the NATO headquarters, Supreme Allied Commander Transformation, and I'm here to elaborate a little bit on how we transfer the old training in a new kind of training, a new architecture, and rather than in the past, it's a global architecture. And what I also would like to stress, how we make us and a lot of nations fit for purpose. Before I dive in the subject, allow me a few words on my assignment as NATO Joint Force Trainer in the light of our near past and the development as we know it today, to give you a first idea what my roles and responsibilities are. Being part of the Allied Command Transformation, which is called NATO's leading agent for change, my task is basically to organize education and training in such a way to better cope with the increasing challenging tasks, operational tasks, which our commanders in the field face. And my job is to prepare the soldiers, but not only the soldiers, all personnel, as good as possible to serve best in the field. And I consider training a common task for NATO and the nations where we have to work very closely together to achieve our optimum results. And I want to make it very clear, I'm not talking about military training, I talk training for military and civilian personnel. And also, this training is based on an international systems approach to training and is also fully in line with United Nations education and training guidelines. So just to make the difference between military training and training for the military. I believe that by involving each and everyone, national partners, training centers, facilities, national institutions, in a more coordinated fashion, we can enhance the effectiveness, effectivity, and we can make training much more affordable. And like we heard in the afternoon in the panel, networking is one of the key elements of it. However, besides the need of restructuring efforts in order to better cope and coordinate and steer training, the question arises, what fundamental change and what challenge do I have to focus on when I'm pursuing the goal to best deliver trained troops to the commanders? In the military, we have seen a major change in the past 20 years. And this is something where we, the military, have to cope with. Important is that in the past, our plans and training did not focus too much on working together with international organizations or non-governmental organizations. We worked together, but it was more kind of national units working together, but not people to people. And what we did, we had homogeneous troops from one nation, and this has changed mightily. So the interoperability on the tactical level was absolutely a no-no. But after the change in the 1989, 1990, geographical boundaries shifted and the security environment also changed very much. Nature of conflict changed. And by the way, all our troops are now serving overseas in many deployments. And because of these forces are so employed, we're working in these deployments with very small units, and we're working with different nations side by side. So that has a strong impetus on changing the training environment, and we have to do much more, acknowledge that language training, for example, is one of the key elements, because otherwise you do not understand your neighbor. And one really key issue is we have to work side by side with civilians much more than before. It's a civil-military relationship which counts today. The emphasis must be reflected to the entire range of our activities. And this is then the key driver for transformation in the world of education and training. We need to work much more effectively on crisis management instruments with the aim to better integrate and facilitate national, multinational, and non-governmental contributions. And this logically has all implications on training. We will increasingly find ourselves working alongside and in support of others to develop a comprehensive, cooperative, interoperative, interagency approach in concert with nations, with international organizations like the European Union, African Union, United Nations. Partnership, especially in all the diversity, will occupy a central place in our daily work. And that is then what makes the difference between a successful and an unsuccessful mission. As I already mentioned in the beginning, my major goal is to make education and training more effective, efficient, and key is then also affordable. Because what I believe is the commanders in the field deserve the best troops possible. And what we need to do is state-of-the-art training. Whilst following our military top-down process, there's also the need to establish a structured process to align nations' training requirements with the offers provided by NATO and national institutions. The challenge is to establish a mechanism that assures that the various institutions provide opportunities that follow the political guidance and meet the requirements. Therefore, standardization and synchronization in the area of education and training is a decisive factor for determining the success. To contribute to the comprehensive political, military, and civil approach, which is necessary for effective crisis management, we actively engage with other actors. This global awareness, like we also heard it in the afternoon, has to be developed by tailored training programs. This mapping of exercising existing training opportunities need to include, for example, nations' venues, which may be utilized by all and not only the soldiers. Therefore, it's of utmost importance for all. To be more open and receptive to educational and national education opportunities, we have designed an education, training, and opportunities catalog, which will be very easy to handle. To better cope with existing requirements for a structured approach to education and individual training, we set up a learning management system, matching training requirements with the opportunities offered in the education training catalog. It supports the delivery of a tailored training plan for each individual, allows transparency in tracking and budgeting functions, and quickly identifies and resolves training gaps and redundancies. This program will allow real-time visibility by all users to ensure transparency and improve communication. And its opportunities to be found on the unclassified web. And that's the first time where NATO went out for the unclassified web. Otherwise, we will not make it. We will not have a kind of global training where we can share with each other all the results which we provide. And by talking only on machines, we should not forget that putting the substance in the machines is this what really drives education and training. In this context, e-learning or advanced distributed learning, like we say it as well, has to be used as an innovative and powerful method of teaching and learning to produce, deliver and maintain effective, relevant and high quality education and training. It's a very essential tool, but it's not the tool. So what we have to look for is a combination of different means of doing the education and training. Furthermore, it encourages informational encounters, unites interior and exterior spaces, and establishes a reciprocal relationship between the campus and the diverse elements outside the building and inside the building. I believe that this building has one of the major prerequisites for a change-oriented and progressive approach. Enable an open-minded environment and constantly try to think out of the box. In addition to that, from my perspective, a second essential precondition for the successful functioning needs to be mentioned, to support critical thinkers who actually dare to behave like this. Therefore, we need well-educated personnel that are creative and able to deal well with ambiguity, that use errors as opportunities for learning, that have the ability for self-critique, and that are ready for creative disruptions of the status quo, which leads to a change of process patterns and finally to reorganization. In the context of our extensive efforts to openly cooperate and collaborate with entities and organizations beyond the circle of NATO nations, our education and training could therefore basically be viewed as a global energy plant, creating the necessary knowledge, skills, and capabilities. And in order to run this as good as possible, It requires us first of all to scrutinize the power generation system itself in terms of functionality and durability. And secondly, compels us to take a close look at the energy sources. On top of that, we need to scrutinize how to effectively analyze and steer education and training events based on efficiency and quality. A major prerequisite in order to enable this approach is to consider education and training as a supply chain of knowledge and capabilities from introductory basic training events to final exercises prior mission deployment. The level of efficiency and quality of this supply chain is therefore determined by its ability to deliver the educated and trained persons as economically and as well prepared for mission as possible. Being aware of the described situation, we considered the following questions. Are education and training programs in areas of expertise founded on a deductible approach? Second, do education and training opportunities facilitate an effective education and training system which ensures to reach given education and training goals as economically as possible? The answer eventually allows us to picture our education and training holistically in order to enable a proper analysis and in order to avoid duplication of efforts, outdated curricula, or misaligned education and training objectives. Furthermore, we could increase our chances for successful improvement because we won't merely treat symptoms, but rather be able to raise the efficiency, effectiveness, and affordability in a target-oriented manner much quicker and much smarter than before. So the holistic approach is the key to education and training success. Ladies and gentlemen, in the following, I would like to brief you very briefly and explain this holistic approach a little bit closer. Based on the assumption that the ultimate goal of each and every training event is train as you fight, the level of reality of training would be directly proportionate to its effectiveness. Thus, the level of reality of training will further on used as a basic pattern to structure and categorize education and training. Based on this starting point, the level of reality as basic pattern for the categorization had been divided into a certain kind of dimensions as depicted on the slide. One-dimensional training events are therefore conducted on the principle of a bird's eye view, for example, a kind of advanced distributed learning, eLearning, which provides written rules and regulations of a certain area of expertise. Two-dimensional training events would include interaction as an additional element. Three-dimensional training embrace a certain level of dynamic environment which is not always predictable. And finally, four-dimensional training covers a real-time elements which normally applies also to real-life exercises. Considering in the next step also the depth of knowledge, that means who needs how to be trained, it allowed us to finally create a cubicle in which our training events can be inserted. As you can see, a common framework had been created on which a proper analysis could be conducted. Our recently established training plans are already solely based upon this approach to training, especially on planning and gender perspective, which is brand new, and women empowerment. During the analysis and the configuration of training elements, this approach enabled us to set the conditions to make it more efficient, effective, and affordable. And for gender, this was done by experts all over the world in a kind of virtual classroom. And here again, the key word is a global approach. On top of that, e-learning or advanced
very clear.
Distributed training was not just a fancy tool, but it actually took over certain parts of our training chain. In the beginning, I mentioned also games, and we invented also some kind of CS game. That means what we do right now is we use the methods which our kids are presently using when they're playing at home. We transfer that into serious education and training for operations. So, ladies and gentlemen, coming to the end of it, when I show you this Borders Ahoy game, we won last year in Orlando on an education and training conference. We won the People's Choice in front of the NASA. And we elaborated further on that and want to present that this year as the soldiers and civilians' choice before they're going into mission. That means they can train wherever they are. They don't need to go in a classroom. And we, from the training and education side, need to be readily available for the substance 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So this is a challenge also for the trainers. I'm sure the future is on our side in a kind of training, establishing that in a very holistic approach. And I believe, ladies and gentlemen, by discussing all these opportunities here on conferences like this, with very passionate discussions, where I learned a lot in this afternoon, I can assure you, and I will take a lot of ideas back into my arena, so to better fix education and training for us all. Asante kwa kunisi kilisa.